I suggest we try and spend an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half together so we can raise various issues with a very interesting, obviously, speakers, because obviously these are people we want to question. Most of them, in fact all of them, have done a lot of things throughout their career. So we'll be spending about 45 to 50 minutes for them to explain their career or the work they have done on the theme here, on the topic that we have actually defined, and then we'll keep at least 20 minutes for questions so that you can address your issues to them. That's the only way we can kind of ensure that we're going to meet the schedule. Now, let me come back to the topic today, and as you can see, crossover visions on cultural innovation. So Europe, United States. Now, I'm not personally not really sure about this theme, if I really... well, when this theme was suggested by Vincent Carré, he said, well, we're going to have some speakers who will be coming along from both the United States and Europe. And then we've got certain French people who've spent some time in the United States and vice versa. So let's try and come up with a kind of crossover to actually see how these two continents work or don't work. Where are the drivers, where are the barriers, where are the pros and cons. So that's what I would like our speakers to talk about. So the outlook or the perspectives are to focus on this kind of subject. I mean, now, I said that I personally wasn't really convinced of the whole interest or the whole purpose of this subject. Anyway, we had lunch together today, and that's when I significantly questioned my personal questioning, if I can put it that way. I really think our speakers have got a lot to say about this, if I can put it, crossover vision, this transatlantic kind of crossover vision. Now, I'm going to briefly introduce them. To be honest, I'd like them to introduce themselves. I'll just provide you with their name and the job they currently hold, the company they work for, but I'd like them to explicit a bit more their past career and to explain, you know, their cross-Atlantic experience. Now, Tariq Krim, who works for Jolicloud, he created the Net Vibes as well, which today is probably better known than Jolicloud. We can start off with Net Vibes, and let's see how we end up with Jolicloud. So that may be an interesting thing to start off with. To the left of Tariq, we've got Stéphane Distinguin, who's the CEO and the founder of FaberNovel, and he's the honorary chairman of Silicon Valley, and he's also president of Cap Digital. I forgot about that name. And that was created by the Ile-de-France French region. Oh no, sorry, I'm wrong. You can explain that one to us afterwards when I come back to you. Sorry about that. I got mixed up here. It wasn't created about the Ile-de-France region, sorry. To the left of Stéphane, we've got Todd Puckhaber. I'm not sure if I'm mispronouncing or... so Puckhaber, who is probably the most renowned person of the Nuit Sonore Festival, because South by Southwest is a festival we've all heard about. It's located in Austin, in Texas, and obviously it's on the world map. Let's be pretentious, it's probably one of the top 5 worldwide festivals. At least it really is a famous festival. I personally haven't been there. We haven't all been there, but we've all heard about this festival. And it's a very specific and special experience. To my right, immediately, and I'm going to start off with him, for him to start this session. We've got Sam Jeffers, who's the Managing Director of Blue State Digital. He's British. It's the Blue State Digital has its headquarters in the UK, but has offices in the United States. Now, I'm going to start off with Sam, because that's going to enable us to introduce our topic, and the people will be able to follow on. Because, in fact, Blue State Digital, I'd like to know, why did you call it, by the way, Blue State Digital? That's my first question. Second question is, you participated to the two presidential campaigns of Barack Obama, and other people around the table were involved in the President François Hollande's campaign, and you were asked to deal with the digital internet campaign of the current French president. So, cultural debate. What are the cultural differences between Europe and the United States, but in fact more specifically between the United States and France? Obviously we cannot just do a copy and paste between United States and France and vice versa, because obviously it's pretty difficult to find a direct equivalent here. I mean, obviously things need to be adapted. So can you just provide why, well, the why of the name, why Blue State Digital and why state, and how do you see things from a cultural point of view? I'm going to ask you all to be extremely brief, because we haven't got much time. I mean, 5 minutes each, if you don't mind, because we'd like to open up the question to the floor, okay?
Avec un micro, with the mic.
Okay, so, hi. To take the first question first, why Blue State Digital? So, Blue State Digital is a firm that has its origins in political campaigning in the US. In the US, there are blue states and there are red states. Blue states are Democratic states, red states are Republican states. We are a company that comes very much from the left, and so blue states are our states, red states are their states, and we're trying to make sure there are more blue states than there are red states, and that is the the way of the world. To give a little background on the company and the way we've worked, we really, well, maybe do it historically. So we started actually out of the failure of a campaign in 2004. Of a guy called Howard Dean, who ran a very different type of election campaign, and he was very interested in the grassroots. His fundraising was not from big donors; it was very much small donors. He had lots of grassroots support on the ground, so lots of volunteers and youth enthusiasm. But ultimately, that campaign failed. And one of the things the founders of the company noticed was that the technology was very poor behind the political campaigning. So none of the tools worked together very well. When things were busy, they would, the servers would fall over. Really critical moments, the most important moments for a campaign, things would fall apart. So they established the company I work for to solve that problem. So really trying to work out how do you make sure that you can talk to tens, hundreds of thousands, and in the most recent campaigns, millions of grassroots supporters at the same time, motivate them to take action, and use technology to help them to do that. And that, I think, is a fairly fundamental principle to a type of campaigning if you want to go that way. And so, that's a type of campaigning that worked very well on the 2008 Obama campaign and took the fact that he was a fantastic candidate, kind of once-in-a-generation candidate, and was able to put a lot of energy behind him and take him to, to the presidency. It worked very well in Brazil, where, in a slightly different type of campaign, we used it there to take, to put Dilma into office, and again to make her the president of Brazil. And in 2000 and sort of late 2011, we got a call from Paris that said, can we do the same thing in France? And the answer was, I suppose we tried. I think for all the interesting contrast, let's just say, between Sarkozy's style on one side and the Hollande style on the other. One guy is energetic, frenetic. The other guy is calm, seems quite controlled. The attempt there was to try and then apply this kind of grassroots campaigning style to the Hollande campaign, and to some extent it worked, and to other extents there were gaps as to how it worked compared to the American model. But the things that did work was they actually raised I think a record amount of money for a European campaign from small donations. The team that was tasked with having people knock on doors and talk to voters managed to contact 5 million voters in France, which again I think was on a scale that hadn't happened before. But some of the things that are so appealing, I mean, if you looked at the Obama 2012 digital campaign that was so appealing about that the content was really fantastic, that they had this amazing brand that was so polished, and lots of the data and the targeting and the testing and all the sorts of things they were doing there were done to such a higher level than was possible here, partly due to resources, but partly due to sort of culture and atmosphere of the two campaigns as well. And so I suppose that is my first point on the gap. I mean, there will be many, but the candidates were different. I mean, Obama is clearly a once in a generation guy, and demands a lot of attention from people, and a lot of, inspires a lot of people. I think people were ready for a change here, and there was something of that, but I don't think it was anything like to the degree that happened in the US in 2008, 2012. And then good technology and good campaigning styles and giving people real things to do and respecting them and involving them and all those sorts of things were adopted by both campaigns incredibly successfully by Obama and somewhat successfully by Hollande.
Stéphane, tu veux peut-être dire un mot, tu étais aussi dans toute cette affaire-là à ce moment-là. Il faut que tu prennes un micro.
I think you're going to have to take a mic as well. You were involved as well, weren't you?
En termes moi je suis entrepreneur.
I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a businessman and a president of a cluster called Cap Digital, which looks after the digital economy of both services and content. And the subject, I'm not really involved in politics, and nor to be involved in politics as such, but looking at what goes on every 4 years in the United States. It's a bit like I see it as the Digital Olympic Games. And after the Obama, with Obama, every 4 years, we can see the very best in terms of what you can do in terms of digital campaigning. And that's basically the Formula One in terms of what's possible. That's a comparison to Formula One racing. So there's a pre and post Obama. No, I would say pre and post digital. We got a campaign with and without Facebook. A lot of things have taken place. Okay, we've got Obama, but we've got the digital technology. I'm not sure if he would have been able to do the same campaign in 1982. A big difference between the France and the United States, because that's the topic this afternoon. I see 3 major differences. Number one, time, the value of time. Okay, a French campaign compared to American campaign. The BSD and the people who worked on Barack Obama's campaign started off much earlier on. I want to talk about François Hollande's campaign, but Sarkozy's campaign. Why? He started much too late on. And very often we say internet, you have to be fast and intermediate, but you have to build it up here. And people started working on Barack Obama's campaign very early on in terms of services campaign, so the time value. So our campaigns are too fast and too short, so we can't seize the amplitude of the digital tools. Second point is fundraising. The sheer power of the American campaigns is this ability of the web and of the internet to generate fundraising. And I don't think we've been able to do this in Europe. I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. I don't think we're capable of collecting that amount of money, as obviously it worked extremely well in the United States. The third thing is the people who actually participate into the campaign. I mean, I went to Chicago to see the offices. It's amazing to see the number of young people who are involved, who for 6 to 8 months decide to no longer work anymore, and they just discontinue their career with Google or Microsoft, and they work. And these are connoisseurs of the field, and they're going to give months of their time, and they at a much lower wage. So obviously in France we don't have that. So we have people who are more militant but less experimented, less sophisticated from a professional point of view. Now, talking about presidential campaigns now, talking about the subject and the doubts you are expressing, it's true. What surprises me is the homogeneity or the uniformness of what we're opposing, Europe versus the United States. I think in our fields, and when we're talking about culture of innovation, we don't talk about these two platforms too. I don't see what Europe is and what the United States, and I don't really see what the United States are in this field. We've got California, we've got two great champions in terms of software, who are the leaders. So we're talking about San Francisco and the Bay, and on the other side we've got Los Angeles in terms of entertainment. Elsewhere in the United States, I'm sorry, the reality is quite different. And okay, you've got Austin, and there were a couple of other spots where they've been able to seize and to come up with events and develop communities and set up communities or whatever. But I really think when we're talking about innovation, we should be focusing more on conurbation than considering the United States as a federation as being totally different. Now, Tariq, you worked in the United States for some time. Do you share what was just stated? Well, like Stéphane, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a businessman. I wasn't born a businessman, but I became an entrepreneur, a businessman. And one of the reasons that led me to... I was a journalist, I worked for Nova, a radio station, and I was interested in many different subjects. One of the key topics for me was the digital things, when we talked about, the modem, the hackers and all that. As I came along, I was 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, and then we suddenly had a tool that totally changed our lives and was possibly going to enable us to change the world. And I like this idea of startups. So when I left, my first job was my first true job. I went to the Silicon Valley, and that was a shock for me, a cultural shock. Because already, in France, things are very uniformized, top engineering schools, universities. What job? I was working on low-cost computers and interactive television. It was a team that was managed by Eric Schmidt at the time, who for a long time was the CEO of Google. But at the time, what was amazing, I realized that I was in a multicultural environment. That was the first time I saw that. Indians, Neos, people from New Zealand, from France, from whatever. And what I found even more amazing is that the French could actually work with Americans, New Zealanders, with Indians, and all together on a product of excellence. And when I arrived there, that was the first time that I faced what I would call absolute excellence in terms of production. I was fortunate to see what was technology called Java at the time. And from the inside, just imagine the launch of the iPhone. So this kind of showcase, this kind of flagship, it's absolutely amazing. The level of detail, the level of know-how was just flabbergasting, just mind-blasting here. And I came back to France, and then I was interested in a lot of things, online music or whatever. And then something took place in the middle of, the years 2000. And I can compare this to electronic music. house music, you had to pay studios, record companies, and then suddenly synthesizers, cheap synthesizers, samplers, and computers came along, and anybody could come up with their own music, their electro music. And the same thing happened with startups between 2002 2004 to do something on the internet. Cost bugger all, just we'll call cost about $50. So creativity was no longer hindered by cost or impaired by cost. So we had a new societal movement took place, and new companies came along, and they were based on a new business model. We no longer had funders or top bosses, but we had creators here. And the creators of these companies, Instagram, Flickr, or what we did with NetVibes, for example, the focus were small teams with a human dimension. At the same time, we were focused on this model of excellence, and I'm an infatigable promoter of this model. I think in France we clearly lack of what I would call creative product startups. Why? Because at a given moment, and that's something that took place in the United States, and we can now see it with the Facebook generation and these new entrepreneurs. At the time, they trusted people, they were willing to believe in people. When I started off, I didn't necessarily have managerial skills and company skills, but I had great enthusiasm, and in fine, that was what was important. At the end of the day, that was what was important. And so this model rolling out here. Now we're in a fascinating situation today because, in fact, we've got thousands of startups throughout the world are changing the world. Now, everybody's chosen their own field, their own domain or sector. But gradually, we are improving little pieces throughout the world. And in particular, phones and all those kind of tools. Each component of our lives are continuously improved by all these small startups. Some of them are profits, others are non-profit organizations. So that's the kind of positive thing I see as far as the past decade is concerned.
From Austin, Texas, vue d'Austin.
So, from Austin, which is not California nor New York, obviously, how do you see things?
Well, first, Sam, thanks for being a blue state, not red state. It's very much appreciated. We need all of the help we can get. It's tough in the United States. I mean, the movement of the far right has made it so difficult for innovation and new technologies to come about. It's a side of culture that is anti-technology, anti-science, and which direction it's swinging, I don't know. And part of the big problem, and this is a little bit out of my field, but it's the money and politics. All of the money is going towards these politics, and we had this law that was passed by the Supreme Court called Citizens United, where basically the corporation is considered an individual and any amount of money is allowed to be given to a candidate. And this is why we see now where for the presidency $1 billion is being spent. And to me it's absolute insanity when we see such a lack of funding happening for so many reasons that are needed. And I think this is one cool thing where South by Southwest fit in. We started with a small idea, is how can we bring together emerging ideas? And it began with emerging bands, with the music festival in 1987. And how can we bring them together with the people they need to know, such as agents and labels and managers and the press that they so desperately need, and how can we bring this group of people together with the bands? And that was the seed, that was the core of South by Southwest. And from there, it's grown into a massive worldwide interactive community that has now come with emerging technologies and a film festival. And now we're about to start South by Southwest V2V in Las Vegas in August, which brings together venture capitalists and entrepreneurs and the people with the ideas, and hopefully create an environment where they can speak the same language. A lot of what we see is even different conferences where they might come together, maybe the artists and the guy with the seed money, maybe they don't really know how to communicate. Maybe the guy with the idea is brilliant, but maybe perhaps slightly socially inept, and but it would make sense for them to come together. And this is something that we hope to promote with South by V2V in August, is to bring these two worlds together. And you know, for me, I see a lot of that really lacking in the United States, which is something that's really good in Europe, which perhaps is a dying breed, is the source of the role of the government that it plays in helping to fund and bring together new ideas. And as South by Southwest being a promotional opportunity for music bands, which basically means for international artists, we don't pay their fees. They must come on their own dime. So what we've always counted on was cultural export offices and tourist offices to help fund these bands to come to South by Southwest. Like with Bureau Exports in France, the whole purpose was to export the culture of France, specifically the music, and many of these offices found that South by Southwest was a great opportunity, a great vehicle to do that. But now we have seen a lot of that funding shrinking, so a lot of these bands are seeking new and alternative means of coming to South by Southwest, much like all of the American bands have always done for years, is through a sponsorship or routing through on a tour, or perhaps now individual cities will come in and grant money, like the city of Angers this year came in with a party and a showcase to not only promote Angers but France. And this seems to be the trend, is perhaps it's less of a national funding, less of a national export, and becoming more and more cities, more and more diversified. And we kind of see this in many different areas. So it's an ever-growing, ever-changing community that we're always trying to tap into. How can we bring these new technologies to Austin when there is such a lack of money? The money is seeming to go to all of the wrong places, and you know, going to the super rich. And you know, hopefully nobody's super rich here. If you are, congratulations. But you know, the money needs to be spread out more to help fund a lot of these cultural activities that are so important to a successful environment.
On va revenir sur le financement, c'est intéressant.
Well, we'll come back to the question of financing. Indeed, we know that, yes, France has, for a long time, financed many things. Coming back to Stéphane and the question of Europe, I'd like to ask Sam, how do you see things, not so much US, France, since you're based in London, but rather UK, France, and now knowing that London, and you can certainly clarify this for us, but it has a Center for Technology near the Olympics site, I believe. And I've seen there's 1,300 startups were attracted to this center. There are probably tax advantages, other forms of aid. I don't know, you know, co-working spaces, etc. Do you see a big difference between London and Paris, for example, just to talk about Europe?
So, you know, this isn't an area I actually spend much time worrying about. Obviously, London has a thing called Silicon Roundabout, which is quite near to our offices. It's literally, you know, un grand rond-point with lots of startups around it. Some of them are reasonably famous. Some of them are, you know, tiny and nothing. You know, my experiences of coming back to Paris and working the Hollande campaign, I met some people who work on incubators and sort of areas in Paris, and again, we're very proud of the work they were doing there. I would say that, from a very external impression of it, that there is very similar ambitions in the two cities, obviously to try and create something akin to Silicon Valley, but on an absolutely minute scale. That said, over the last 5 years, particularly in London, there's a lot more being spoken of in terms of sort of startup culture and meetups and importing some of those things that they've seen in the States and trying to use that to kick things off. Time will tell whether it's successful, because I don't think there's a particularly standout. There's no Google at least scale firm out of London, and whether or not that's economically important in the grand scheme of things, because it's a tiny fraction of a tiny fraction of our economy. So the government is interested because I think it makes the government look cool, and this is where all the interesting things happen. But I suspect that the advantages America has, the big universities right next to the big startups and able to pull all the talent back and forward is something that London will take a long time to catch up with, and probably Paris too.
Stéphane, Tariq, la même question. On est dans un système, semble-t-il, en France, assez unique, puisque
Stéphane,
il y a un certain nombre de
tell us a bit what's going on in the public policies that you've seen for digital businesses. Perhaps there's no real equivalent to, of course, what we see in the U.S. It's trying to find a site is already rather difficult. But what we do know is that some regions in France are trying to take the lead here, and the Lyon area, the Lyon region, is definitely dynamic with strong public policies. So how do you see this evolving? Well, coming back to something that Todd said, because I did direct a festival at one point in my career, certainly not on the same scale, but coming from the Paris region, we talk a lot about ecosystems, and our ecosystem is in competition with London, certainly. And it's true that we have to think hard about what needs to be done. Now, it's true that the French are considered very pessimistic, a gloomy bunch, but at the same time, I can say that in the past 10 years that I've been in this field, that things are going much better, that progress is being made in France to encourage these dynamic new companies. If we look at Silicon Valley, when we look at what they've achieved there, and looking at festivals, looking at what South by Southwest has achieved as well. Of course it's impressive, but it does take time. We're working in a very different context, and you can't expect to have results in just 2 years. So you have to accept that idea and have to work around that and with that. Now, it's the past 7 or 8 years. I've been wanting to go to South by Southwest, have a booth, and every time, well, it's probably very French, but we tend to think that, we need to have help to do it. Can we get money from City of Paris? Can we get money from Dijon? I don't know. And for those of you who don't know, South by Southwest, what's fantastic about the model there is that first of all, there are panels, round tables, things like that. And you can even organize one. You can suggest, I would like to do a roundtable on this subject, and then you can really carry it through. So that's amazing. And I don't think any French person has ever made it, has really seized that opportunity. And also another thing that's incredible is that you can put together a delegation and go. And the French haven't managed to do that either. So it's true that, okay, the music people go, yes, they can get certain aid, certain financing, but in other fields where we could certainly benefit from what's going on at South by Southwest, and we are just not finding ways to do it. Although we do have public policies in place, however, it can be very bureaucratic. So that takes a certain amount of courage to deal with all of that. If you look at Silicon Valley, if you go to Google, there's about 12 delegations turning up saying, I represent so-and-so, I'm from this. And, we're not very good about this. We're not very organized. And even though Paris, I think is very creative, and I think can rival London, and I know quite a few projects. There's a lot of things happening, but at the same time, we do have a serious problem, is that we do have good engineers. We have a strong engineering environment, but we're horrible at marketing. We don't know how to tell the story. We don't know how to make people believe in what we're doing or get across our ideas. And so the London Tech City, got somebody from Facebook, I think. So they really, the French need to learn from that. We need to learn to sell ourselves much better. That's a weakness. Perhaps Tariq has something to say about that. Well, I can see it as a businessman, yes. For the past 15 years, we want France to be a leader in digital fields. And so when we hear about these new projects, people keep wanting to create a French Silicon Valley. So they're always talking about finding the site, putting up the infrastructure and the budget. But after 5 years spent in California, in the Silicon Valley, if you saw the infrastructure, the roads are terrible. You often don't have phone coverage. The high-speed internet wasn't even working as well as it often does in France. So it's not a question of infrastructure. I think that's quite obvious. But there's two real keys to the success over there. And first of all, which is unique and which is difficult to replicate, and that's the financing. Here and in the cultural field in particular, when we look at Kickstarters or things like that, for film production, etc., that's fantastic. But in the U.S., it's kids, well, not necessarily kids, but, people often straight out of school who know how to put together a team of people and build up their company the way they want. But in France, our financing system, with venture capital, isn't very venturous. I guess that's the only way to put it. Invest in the unexpected is something that we don't know how to do because, sometimes technology takes you into unexpected areas that you weren't expecting, whereas the French are a bit allergic to risk. And so, we immediately want to see that they're viable economically, financially, before people are willing to put money into it. So... but and then the problem is that some of those young companies, if they think they can do better in the U.S., well, then they're out of there. They're off to the U.S. where they know they can get the funding, they can get investors more easily than in France. And so, I have an example that I like. It's that a company that wants to do intelligent parking. You don't have to figure out where to park your car. There's a whole digital application. So in France, if a company sets up, in San Francisco, you'll get the mayor's office saying, "Fantastic! What can we do to help you?" And in France, well, it's much tougher. And so you can see that it's much more open-minded at all levels in the U.S. for new projects. And so when I look at and there's some really young people setting up incredible businesses, but what is the will they have the means to achieve their vision? When you want to change, make a medical breakthrough, when you want to change the way we live the city, thanks to all of these new developments. Well, I think the Americans are better at this. When, for example, when I saw the Obama's campaign, and we saw that they had some difficulties in the beginning with the internet communication. They completely turned that around. So there's the financing is the one thing. It's quite different from one country to another, but we have to know how to work together. The real world and those bright ideas seem to me they come together more easily. And I'd like to ask Todd a question. In fact, the project, the Las Vegas project that you mentioned, could you tell us a bit about how you had this idea? And I don't know, is it an idea we can steal from you? I don't know. What are you intending to do with that? And what's so how you came up with the idea and how you see it in the future?
Well, I have to be honest, I didn't come up with the idea personally, but it is part of our interactive team that saw a need at the Interactive Festival. With the size of Interactive and how fast it was growing, I mean, basically we've outgrown Austin with the interactive part of it. And there was a need to bring together more of the money and the visionaries together in one place. And the Interactive Festival itself is already, full. I mean, there just wasn't a lot of room to include that kind of segment in it. So the decision was made after a lot of wooing from Las Vegas to bring South by Southwest to Vegas. And of course, we opted to not move everything there, but the decision was made to kind of bring this idea to Vegas and try to nurture it in a way that would really help bring the two parties together, and it's really interesting.
Sorry, why Vegas?
What's that?
Why Vegas? Why not another city?
It really began because Vegas was wanting South by Southwest to come there. So they actively reach out to events or artists or whatever to come to Las Vegas. Vegas is brilliant in that way. I mean, they come up with all kinds of. It's an adult playground. It's a Disneyland that many people find horrible. It's a fun place to visit once, whatever. But they're brilliant in bringing ideas to Vegas, the arts to Vegas, to draw customers to them. So that is something they do extremely well. So they saw the value of South by Southwest, reached out to us to bring something there. We really didn't have the interest of moving the entire music festival, the film festival. I mean, they really wanted us to move the whole shop there, and offer great sums of money to do that. And it didn't interest us. I mean, Austin was our home. That's where we fit. We still feel like it's a very homegrown business that we have. And the people that have been in it for a long time, it's still our passion. So it's not something that we just wanted to sell and kind of give away. And these ideas that we bring up, it's really our passion. It's really something that we believe. But we did have this new idea of the V2V, and it really didn't fit into the interactive festival proper at South by Southwest during that week. Perhaps it could have been before or after, but already we added a South by EDU component to the festival, which is right before, which is an educational aspect to South by. So we didn't really want to make the thing any longer. So they provided us with many options of why V2V would work in Vegas, so we did. So that's an idea that we want to help bring there, and something that Tariq was saying, it's interesting that, I guess in America, the venture capitalists, maybe that's something that we do better, but in a way, there's also a downside of that, is that we've never had any government cultural support to develop ideas like there is in Europe. And maybe there's a problem with that now in Europe with the lack of funds to continue that tradition, but there's really been something missing in the United States, is the value of artistic movement, the value of new ideas. You're on your own to sink or swim, and the government is not really there to help you, and I find that really valuable in Europe, that there has always been this culture to support the arts in one way or another. And I wish there was a melding of the two systems somehow, where the money in America could help fund these ideas, but still allow the freedom of expression from that guy that had that idea to run with it and make it his best.
Tariq, on présente une petite vidéo.
Tariq, I think you have a video you wanted to show us, a project that you're working on. And then after the video, we'll take questions from the audience.
En une minute, ça naît comment un projet,
So, just in a nutshell, how does such a project come along here? I mean, how long did it take? Who actually worked on it? How many people were involved? How was it funded? Just very briefly, in a nutshell, can you summarize this project? I think most projects, and I think we all agree, it's the result of an obsession, of a passion. When I was talking about providing a contribution, I've always had two obsessions. Number one, simplification. I've got the impression that we live in a very complicated world, and if we can simplify the lives of people, we can provide progress. I don't think the progress is to improve 50% of the population. No, it's to improve 5% the lives of everybody. And the European obsession is probably the idea of a memory, memory of remembrance here. Now, we talking about coming towards a 100% digital world, and we've got no control in terms of what we're going to keep. No trace, nothing. The internet and the web, it's always a battle between huge companies, Google, Amazon, Facebook, whatever. And the subject today is to find out who's going to sell what phone or what product. And in fact, at the end of the day, all this data we've got belongs to us. And when we launched this project, this kind of hard drive, we all had our portable hard drive previously, which we no longer have, real cloud now. But anyway, we thought we'll keep those things that are important, those things that in 10, 20, 30 years will still seem important, videos, music, documents. We want We wanted to keep them for posterity. To answer you, it's a small team. It's just 12 of us. Average age, 24, 25 years old. With people who are highly demanding from a technological design point of view, also in terms of their vision. It's quite funny. I'm 40 years, well, got my 40 years this year, and I'm with this Facebook in the generation, and everybody says they're interested in nothing, they're not interested in politics, and they're only self-centered with Twitter and Facebook. And in fact, it's a total opposite. And the idea was to very rapidly, well, when we prototyped it, we said, that's what we want to do. That's what it's going to look like. We came up with the first version. We made it available to the users, and the people said, we like this, we don't like that, we like this, like, we redo, until we come up with a product that seems to satisfy most users. And then we launched it. How long did it take? 4 months. The Jolicloud.
Vous avez la parole.
So, the floor is open. I don't know where the mics are. We'll have to give up one mic.
Des questions.
Questions.
Sûrement une question. Il faut se lancer. Hein. Allez.
The first question is always the most painful one.
Madame? Non, Madame,
Yes,
vous avez une question, Madame?
Have you got a question?
Ah, non,
yes,
pardon,
no?
voyais
Sorry.
Monsieur.
Oh. The gentleman there.
Oui, c'est bon. Donc, Kevin Vergobin,
Kevin, Urban, you know, for Austrian culture. My question addresses everybody, in fact, not anybody in particular. Don't you think that there's no public support, apparently, in the United States? Hasn't that enabled the kind of cultural players to go beyond what's possible? And in France, since we've got this support that has been around for a long, long time, haven't we had to wait for these years of recession to actually start to innovate? So, 4 points of view.
You do.
Who's willing to start?
I think they've been talking about two slightly different things. So I think on the technology side, I think the sink or swim is probably quite a good thing, because most of the products are, you have to find customers, and if you're trying to find customers for something new and the state says yes or no to your product, I suspect you're probably not building things that people want. I think, however, on the cultural side, the music side, I think, I actually used to play in a band and would play in Europe, and we would get paid well, and we would go to the United States and we would not get paid at all. And in one place it's easy to be innovative and make new things and have a good time. In the other place you sink or swim, and it's much harder. So I think maybe we've been talking about two different things here.
Voilà. Moi, je sais pas avoir de réponse simple. Parce que
I haven't got a simple answer. In France, a couple of months ago, there was a big issue about the CNC, which is the National Movie Funding Institution. It's a public institute. There was a big debate. The link I see between the industrial culture and the creative cultures, and that's the idea. Tariq was talking about unexpected, and I like the underground culture or approach. The underground, by definition, is very difficult to apprehend. I've got a couple of convictions. There's an art et d'essai culture. I don't think in video games you can have an art et essai. Now, it must be justified in one way.
Moi, il y a quelques années, je me rappelle.
A couple of years ago, I remember when we started, when we launched the Cantine, and I said I was quite proud of the techno, digital Paris Spielder, there was Daily Motion. We had Tariq who was there. I don't know if you remember then. And I was in gastronomy. We weren't very good. And the Nuit Parisienne. I'm talking about Paris. I'm sorry. I am Parisian. The Nuit Parisienne and the Parisian gastronomy. Was down, and we were good in techno. 2-3 years later, we're in the opposite situation. It's quite surprising. It's the total opposite, where once again Paris has invented new places to go out. Paris is a place where you can eat well and you can go out and really have these great experiences that are an honor for Paris. But the startup scene is probably not quite as good as it used to be. So it's extremely difficult you have the unexpected side and the underground. It's not easy. Like I said, there's been this total turnaround in Paris. So there are true issues in terms of public policies here. And from that point of view, I think what we want the public policies to define, well, two things. Offer the necessary conditions in terms of innovation and to be there to facilitate a certain number of things. Like today, for example, give us a room and enable organizers to, just like it's done in Austin or Las Vegas and here in Lyon. And also every so often to incarnate a vision, to provide a vision. We need a vision because the stakes, digital stakes are such, and what Tariq was mentioning, or all these startups which we are seeing and which are created in the Silicon Valley, I think we need a vision, and I think it's, let's face it, in life, we haven't just got Facebook and Twitter. I love those companies. I mean, I admire them, but to come up with a Google with algorithms and research, you needed Stanford, you needed a vision of algorithm, you had to have a vision of science and research. And that's in the field of industrial policy. How about you, Tariq? I'd like to add, my subject today is a bet on our youth. That makes the difference. It doesn't mean that when you're no longer younger, you're bad or you're outdated. No. Or you're obsolete. No, far from it. There's a permanent renewal. And this permanent renewal, I mean this renewal today, I mean, I observe. I'm an observer much more so than a contributor to music. But those who saw the beginning of techno in the mid of the 80s, there were two countries at the time who really were supporting this music, and it was France and Germany at the time. And a bit of, obviously, England, the UK. They had an amazing cycle as well. What fascinates me in the festivals in France is it's hyper sophisticated, but at the same time it gives a share to very new things and a good balance as well with things that are well established, and so there's nice balance here. There's been this desire for France to be a catalyzer, and it was true with the world music and the Sonomon Mondial, the worldwide sono. What's a shame, and what we haven't been good at in the field of technology. What I find great with San Francisco, which I loved when I was there, which isn't quite as true. You have to talk about it with Berliman. It was the time when you had artists, you had geeks, you had people who are ex-hippies. You had a cultural mixer. You don't forget that Silicon Valley was the outcome of the hippie revolution of the 60s. And behind that, there was this idea of the Wall Earth Review, amazing magazine. This idea to have a scientific rigor and at the same time to have an artistic kind of dream, Now, it could work in France. We were able to do it with music, with video and music. Yesterday we saw amazing videos. We haven't succeeded doing that in France in the field of technology, coming up with this kind of mayonnaise to make sure that France ensures this role and function as an aggregator of new talents, but also to recycle things. We haven't created the necessary relations, I don't think, with Silicon Valley, with New York or Austin. And I've never been to Austin, and I've always sent my team. And I now realize that's probably a mistake. I probably should have gone myself. It's with encounters, just like meeting Todd. I mean, that's how things, I believe more in people than in institutions. I think the right institutions with the right rules come up with magical things. No, I think it's the right people at the right place that can produce that. Anyway, that's my point of view. Todd?
It's a difficult question. I think it really gets into some philosophical ideas on the difference of culture. I mean, United States was based on an entrepreneurial idea, you know, the American dream. You're free to do what you want, and in my opinion, it's become kind of a twisted nightmare in a way, because you know, you're, in one sense, you're free to take the risk and do what you want if you can have an idea and can find some money if you need it to build that idea. Or, you know, even a band to me are entrepreneurs. I mean, they're trying to produce a product that people will buy, and they can live off this product and live their dream of being artists. And but in the United States, when there really isn't the government to support the arts and culture, and you're on your own, you may be more free with less guidelines from if you're applying for a grant or something. In France, there may be a variety of guidelines that you have to adhere to. But now it's kind of gotten to the point in the United States where, especially in the government, where the arts aren't really valued. I mean, when schools, where children go to school, when there's a budget problem, the first things to get cut are art class and music class. It's not necessary. It's more important to learn science and math and reading. And you know, I guess if we all want to be robots or something, that's great. But I mean, what is there to nourish the soul? And you know, that seems to be something that Europe has learned over the years, is that there is an importance to culture and artistry. I mean, you know, look at this room. It's gorgeous. And for things like this in the United States, it's always private money to support the arts. And you know, it almost seems to be a hybrid, because what would be really good, because now that kind of idea in Europe, it still exists, but there seems to be a real lack of money that we see at South by Southwest, with a lot of the export offices having much less to spend. And now it's really the private companies, you know, it's so much more of the interactive companies. The money has really kind of swung that way. And a lot of the sponsorships, you know, we'll get like the Samsung house this year spent $3 million to have a venue, and paid Prince $1 million. I mean, that's something that we would never do, but that was their marketing budget for South by Southwest. That's how they wanted to present themselves, and yeah, I hope they got their money's worth. So, you know, it seems like some sort of hybrid solution would be great, where in the United States you could have a government that really cared about the arts, really funded the arts and culture, but yet, you know, could leave intact that entrepreneurial spirits and, you know, the supposed American dream that you could achieve, that if you only try, you can become a millionaire, you know. So, you know, hybrid solution, whatever that is, I don't know. I hope we achieve it.
Une autre question.
Another question.
Merci pour la qualité de ce débat.
Thank you very much for the sheer quality of this debate, of these discussions. Remarkable. Now, I would just like to refer to the previous round table. Now, in France, we saw that, okay, we're no longer in a total institutional system, and we've decided that it's not a good thing. And in fact, we got this emergence of or this kind of ability of going towards new products is kind of limited when you're talking about sheer public funding. And it just shows that if the two systems just stay as they are, both systems are limited, just like Todd just said. And it's true that merging would be great. Now, innovation, we're not just talking about discovery, or an invention, but how does it encounter a kind of societal dimension? Now, coming from another world, we're talking about it's a heart transplant, which from a technological point of view is extremely straightforward, but radically change the total landscape of a certain life mythology. You can change the heart. It's an interchangeable pump. So it's not just an invention, it's what potentially is going to improve. And Tariq said this, it's better to improve the life of everybody, but by 5% instead of improving just a couple of people here. Now, how can we, in France, because let's face it, we haven't got this, let's face it, in France, this way of relying and believing in innovation. And it's more the cities and the towns and the local authorities that can do something more so than the state. The example of San Francisco is remarkable from that point of view. Now, how can we do things at the level of, how would I say, cities and towns? But the problem is you have the elections. Now, how can we have this taste for betting, willing to place a bet, and not just play on the value that's purely safe or which isn't going to lead to a major change, but we're just talking about an average? Because how can we avoid this kind of short-term vision and make sure that we have something that has a certain sustainability? Now, I'm asking all of you, both in the UK and the United States, but also in France, these issues seem to be fundamental.
Qui se lance?
Well, you know, a major problem I see in the United States from achieving that sort of thing is this huge conflict that's happening now in our culture. And, you know, it almost seems like, how do we do that? I don't know. But to rise above that and to become more in agreement and become a more peaceful and amiable society, you know, this is when a culture flourishes. You know, it's such a divisive time right now in the United States. It's such a split, and it just seems to be further and further apart. And right now, we're just stuck, and nothing gets done. Nothing is agreed on. Everything is an argument. There is no middle ground. To compromise is wrong. This is something that we have to overcome, and you know, hopefully we can evolve out of that. You know, it's you know, for me, I think a lot of it started with George Bush. I think he really divided our country with particularly like the Iraq War. I mean, basically he said if you're against it, you're not American, and you're against our country. And right away that split half of our country, and it's been that way ever since. And we've had people go further right, and the left. I think we've all pretty much stayed where we are. We're not so extreme. And I think when the day can come where tempers are lowered and people can hopefully agree more, you know, there's plenty of money out there. I mean, there's plenty of money, and the problem is that there's such a huge divide of wealth right now. You know, I assume it's the same in Europe, but in the United States, you know, a huge percentage of the money is all at the 1%. And, you know, the Republicans are still trying to lower their taxes and pay even less. And at the same time, we're cutting funding for the arts. Our bridges are collapsing. There's less and less money for the poor. And, you know, there's trillions of dollars floating out there. There's plenty of money to go around to help do these things, and it's a cultural problem that I hope that we can solve. And you know, wow, if you have an answer, I'd love to hear it.
Tariq, tu veux intervenir?
Tariq. It's interesting what you're saying. It's true. In the United States at the moment, we've got a cultural split. We've, on the one side, anti-technology, on the other side, hyper-technology. Now, And on one side, we got people who think, it's interesting in that documentary where we have so many people think that the world was created in 6 days. Now, culturally speaking, okay, I'm based in Europe, but I've always kept a very interesting or keen eye, or even a critical eye on new technologies in general. I probably can say I think the Silicon Valley has destroyed more jobs in the United States than Wall Street over the past 15 years. It created other jobs, but I'm not sure that the jobs that have been created, we talked about digital sweatshops. There was an article recently, somebody wrote a book, and he went to work for Amazon in France. He was infiltrated there, and he worked as a digital, what I call a digital operator, people who have to work God knows how many hours for our generation. The digital 1%, the people who've got iPhones, who buy apps, and who want the world to work in a single click. And the rest of the planet is virtually working free of charge for this particular 1% vision. And what I find strange is that in Europe, we've never been able to state our cultural difference, our difference in general. Political difference, our vision of different vision of the world. There's a mindset that's different. And what we forget is when we're talking about creating startups, we've seen things as being local, but I think the vision should be global. I mean, I've got a small quantification, personal quantification tool. What I find amazing when we're talking about a political vision, and that's a subject we often talk about with Stéphane. Why today, France, who invented the Social Security, so to be cared for, Medicare, and I went to San Francisco twice, and people who criticized the system in France, they're wrong, believe me. The next step is that the people better no longer be ill, and prevention needs to be accessible to everybody. I'm amazed that we're not investing in those kind of topics and subjects, because there are amazing markets even in terms of export. There's a vision of the world which we should uphold, and Europe, okay, France, let's focus on France, has to reconciliate itself with its vision of the world. We need to stop saying, oh, let's do Me Too's and let's just copy that company in the United States because they're doing well. And we need to invent concepts, societal concepts. We need to go beyond just a copy and paste approach here. And just as a conclusion to this, when we're talking about public investment policies, and we've got a strong concentration of powers, we've got the BPI, which is a public investment bank. We've got these public tools. What to try and tell these players? In 80% of the time, just do what you normally do. Just invest how you're supposed to, how you've previously invested, but give the remaining 20% to things you would never even have considered, people you would never betted on. Because in Fidei, it's often there that these nuggets or amazing success stories are. We should never oppose models. I think models coexist and add on to each other, but we need to be willing to take risks. I'm more a technology expert, but I'm sure it's the case in culture, urbanism, and all other fields.
En fait, pour savoir, parce que j'étais un peu là au début, mais...
Oh, is it? Yeah, at the beginning. Are you an elected official? Yes? Yes. I'm not familiar. It's our cultural cultural representative here. There's a first element here, and I won't, since you are here, and that's sincerity, and that's the issue. When we're talking about our subjects, we've got the habit of dealing with people who want to talk about our subjects, who are interested in the subjects, but they only do it in an ephemeris, on a pop-up basis here, or during a political campaign, because these are votes they can get hold. And we realize that. Are they sincere or not? Do you really believe on it? What we're producing and what's going on here? So that's a true issue. Sincerity. Are you sincere? Now, so let me come back. Earlier on, what you're doing here, and what we need to move forward, we need openness here. We also need people who help us avoid friction. One of the major issues, and a particular issue in France, and that's the constraints and red tapes, and to be an entrepreneur in France and and to have activities. I mean, I've got activities in New York and San Francisco. The Americans are a hell of a lot better. I mean, it just flows here. It's dead easy. No red tape. And as an elected official, you can set an example here, not just from a business and a political point of view. I'm amazed about how difficult it is to get an appointment with an elected official in France. It's a question of standing. It seems to be, oh no, you'll get an appointment in 3-6 months' time, and to cancel at the very last moment. Whereas in the United States, I'm sorry, and that's admirable. That belongs to the American dream. You're accessible. Somebody asks you for an appointment, you give him 5 minutes or just 15 minutes, and but if you're not good, you'll probably even get a second meeting, and that does not exist here. Now you should talk about that, and that's my experience anyway. That's a big difference. If you want to see somebody important in France, you better know somebody who knows whatever, and you have to wait for 6 or 8 or 9 months, and even then it's difficult. And then you put in and then even when you're in the waiting room, they may cancel your appointment at the last minute. And last point, I talked about a lot of elements that pertain to a trendy word, and that's what we call in French bienveillance here. That means to look at somebody in a positive way, but that does not mean that you cannot be demanding. France has got an issue to recognize its models rapidly and to support them. In the digital world, in France, with Tariq, I mean, we grew up on models that are 30, 40 years called Dassault System or Business Objects. These are companies totally respectable, but don't mean anything at all today. And we need, and I think it's you are the decision makers in this MSM, you, the public, civil society, journalists and elected officials. We need to recognize what's good and what isn't good. And you need to support them and see them on a regular basis here. And it shouldn't just become people, once again, this is very French. I mean, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, oh, yes, fine. You were highly successful then, but today, what's happening? Okay, well, we've been able to meet our schedule, which is a great performance, let's face it, considering what time we started. I really would like to thank our speakers here, because it really was a remarkable panel this afternoon. Obviously, I'd like to thank the City of Lyon and the Greater Lyon to support the European Lab, because this kind of debate won't be possible, this kind of discussion. And as working for the Libération newspaper, it's a great source of passion, and this leads to many features and many subjects. So thank you all for coming along.